Let me introduce the second panel of the day, which is Impact Asset Manager Learnings. So I would like to call to the panel first Mike Hokenson, partner in community investment management in the United States. Mike, please be seated in exactly the middle of the seats. Thank you so much. Also, I would like to call Professor Lena Tsipouri, who will be seated on the left of Mike, and our moderator, Milti Chryssavgis, the founder and CEO of Drashta Impact, will be seated on Mike's right. Together, virtually with us, we will also be having Mr. Dimitris Batzis, head of Southern CEE and Mediterranean from Schroders, and Cyril Gouiffes, the head of Social Impact Equity Investments and Guarantees in the European Investment Fund.
Wonderful, thanks for joining. Delighted to be leading this conversation around asset management learning. To hear many different perspectives from panelists ranging from large asset managers, investment managers with hands-on experience on the ground, from the academic perspective, and a large European institution as well. So to kick things off, I'd like to go around to the panel just to give a brief introduction on themselves, to get some context and flavor of their perspective and experience before we do a deeper dive in the questions. So, Mike, you want to kick us off?
Greetings, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. We have, at Community Investment, we have deep roots with the Greek-American community as part of our investor base. We are deeply indebted to the contributions Greece has made to the world of impact investing. We are an impact investment manager focused on responsible fintech credit. And Greece is an incredible example of the potential there. Our borrowers set are typically a small, medium enterprise that does not have or does not qualify for traditional bank financing. And when you think about the economic makeup of Greece, with nearly 1 million SMEs, 90% of which have less than 10 employees, that is sort of the perfect potential opportunity set for what we believe will be the transformative sector of financial services and financial inclusion in the 21st century, which is responsible fintech.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. And Professor Lena, we'd like to hear from you as well.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for the invitation. I'm actually here with two hats. I'm Emeritus Professor at the University of Athens, National and Kapodistran University of Athens, where I have been teaching entrepreneurship for a long time. Not social entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship in general. And what is extremely interesting is that the young generation is very willing to look at social entrepreneurship. So from the assignments I used to give to my students, almost 30%, a third, would be students suggesting social impact, enterprises that have a social impact. They're doing they had a lot of ideas for environmental protection and social support services. So I think this is the optimistic part of my presentation. Now, as a consultant, because we have also founded a startup company doing consulting based on data analytics, as a consultant, I don't have an optimistic message to pass. I think the Greek government is very traditional in its approach towards social services. So I think there are two worlds, and this is why I think this conference is extremely timely and important to see how these two worlds can be brought together.
Thank you, Lena. And next we have Dimitris Batzis from Schroders.
Hello, everyone. Apologies that I cannot be there. Unfortunately, my flight was cancelled yesterday, so I would love to be there. But in any case, luckily we have the technology with. So since 2015, and now I'm additional countries in this region. And in general, what we as a house, so Schroders, We are a global asset manager, and we exist since 1804. And since then, we have been doing only one thing. It was asset management. As you understand, we have been through crises, wars, and difficult situations, and we've never been changing the DNA what we have. So that's why we can claim ourselves that we are maybe the biggest global boutique, if you want, in the asset management industry. And I'm more than happy to participate in our discussion today.
Thank you, Dimitri. And last but not least, we have Cyril Gouiffes from the European Investment Fund.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I would wish I would be here with you in Athens, but still in Luxembourg. Thank you for your understanding. Quick presentation. The European Investment Fund is an EU body. It's part of the European Investment Bank group. So the overriding mandate of the European Investment Fund is to increase access to finance for European SMEs. And in this respect, we mobilize a whole wide set of different financial instruments. And we, of course, are very much focused on impact investing. We started in 2013 in running or managing the first sources of funding for European impact startups and impact funds. Be happy to elaborate further after that. I'm, since 2019, in charge of the social impact strategy of the EIF, and again, happy to elaborate further and share this time with you this morning.
Thank you, Cyril. So we'll hand over to Mike. It would be great to hear some of your experience on the ground and maybe share some of the learnings you've experienced and capacity building exercises you've seen through the years.
Sure. So 20 years ago, I was a student pursuing a dual degree in business and environmental science. It was a sustainable dual degree at the University of Michigan. I chose to focus on microfinance, which at that moment was in a process of commercialization. It was passing from the grant-supported microfinance banks in dozens of countries over the last 60 years to private sector-supported banks, which were profitable, which were serving tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of end customers, micro-entrepreneurs. Since that time, through 2 investment entities, through 4 investment funds, we have backed over 100 specialty lenders in the micro and SME sector in 50-plus countries. In the last 10 years, we have focused exclusively on digital finance. And I think the biggest light bulb was first about the idea that different sized businesses could be served in a dignified way, profitably, with innovation within finance, and that sort of stems from the core insight in microfinance was that you could form a group, that you could change the distribution model and collection model of cash, but fundamentally also change your underwriting model to understand that a cash flow-based business was indeed backable with a credit product. And second, the innovations that have taken flight within the virtual space in fintech are incredibly profound. One, they are moving upmarket from micro into global SME. And to put a sort of view on that opportunity, there's 350 million SMEs, 800,000 of which are in Greece. They provide more than in half of all GDP. They provide typically 80 to 90% of employment by country. And there's a multi-trillion-dollar lending deficit year on year. And that's measured by World Bank, IFC, development financial institutions, et cetera. So why such a great opportunity set and why such a big gap? The main breakdown has been the transition from traditional underwriting by a bank against hard assets like real estate into things like service-based businesses that banks have failed to keep pace with in terms of their credit analysis. And fintech has zeroed in on that opportunity set, creating products that are sector-by-sector specific, that are truly unlocking that capital, understanding that business, and extending affordable, transparent, responsible terms to those borrowers. And just to give you a sense of how quickly fintech has grown since we have been involved, To date, you have over 50,000 fintech startups funded with venture capital. In a market like Greece and most of the emerging world and even developed world, that has mainly come in the form of equity. There's about 25% of those 50,000 startups focused on lending in one way or another, and now credit is coming in to complement that venture capital risk dollar and expanding those loan portfolios. And they're reaching tens of millions of customers, and there's really, we see no limit to how fintech is going to transform traditional financial services to the better of the borrower, the community, and that small business.
Great, thanks, Mike. Lena, from an academic and university perspective, how do you think educational institutions can help cultivate the impact investment ecosystem in Greece?
In Greece and everywhere, actually. I think universities have a lot to offer. I mean, the educational system is not adapted yet to this type of thinking. You get a lot of teaching on sustainability. You have a lot of teaching on social investment, on social support, social protection, sociologists work on that. But when it comes to finance, departments of finance, or even the basic courses of finance, they hardly speak to undergraduate students about green investment, about social investment, about social impact, or anything like that. It's almost, again, like two different worlds. There are, of course, areas of interaction where financial courses integrate a little bit of sustainable investment, but I think a lot needs to be done to change the basic curricula. There are universities which are very progressive in the sense that they like to teach new subjects or to experiment with new ideas. Some of them will work, others will not. But I think what is important is to get the ball rolling in the educational system. And this has to start at the undergraduate level, integrate, one or two lectures in the basic courses on finance, on what is impact investment, what are green investments, what is the structure of funds that do not have the metrics to only measure return on investment. And I think this would be the first step. Of course, universities can do a lot more. Universities are more and more involved in what we call the third pillar, so speaking with the community. And this is an area where universities can speak with the community. The community is more receptive on such topics. And universities can also work on consulting. And in Greece, universities do a lot of consulting work. And they can educate the public service, which I think is the area that needs education most and can make a big difference.
Do you still have Dimitris with us? Yes? No? Okay. Just after he praised the wonders of technology, his video started cracking up, so he brought it on himself. Anyway, so we'll hand it over to Cyril, and could you share with us the role that the EIF has played, maybe more broadly within Europe, in supporting impact fund managers?
Yes, happy to, and crossing fingers that the technology remains steady. So we like to see ourselves as pioneers in the European impact investing ecosystem. As I mentioned in the short introduction I shared, the European Investment Fund is here to increase access to finance for European SMEs. We do that on an indirect fashion, so that means the EIF has been historically the largest investor on the venture capital ecosystem in Europe, and certainly the largest LP in the European ecosystem. As an illustration, we invested last year, and again this year will be in the same magnitude, 3 billion euros in European venture capital funds. Part of it is actually targeted, invested, committed into impact funds. We started in 2013 by raising the first dedicated impact mandate or fund of fund, the Social Impact Accelerator, massively supported by the European Investment Bank, our mother company, and 4 external investors, of which the Bulgarian Development Bank, the CITRA, the Finnish Development Fund, and Credit Cooperative and Deutsche Bank. So by raising this mandate, our idea and value add on the market as we saw it was the following. We want to catalyze as much private or alternative sources of funding into the impact ecosystem. Because we, building on our experience as a fund of fund manager on the venture capital ecosystem, we figured that our role is not to actually be softer on terms. When we invest in a fund, we have a reputation of having a very demanding due diligence process. If we do, this is also in the understanding that the fund that we are going to invest in is going to also have an easier time raising from other sources of funding, institutional investors, high net worth, private, institutional, etc. So this is really how we started and where we saw our value add. So to be slightly schematic and to illustrate how our role has evolved, back in the period 2013-2015, most of the impact funds that would come to us would be raising 20, 30, sometimes 40 million euros. And typically we would invest 50% of the fund size. Of course, when we are convinced and we have pushed through our investment decision process. So acting as a cornerstone and quality seal for the emerging generation of impact funds was really how we started approaching impact investing. The market has developed quite a lot since then, and I know there are other questions, and we are having a whole panel, so I don't want to share too much on your question now. But what I can say is that nowadays the funds that we see are often closer to 100, 150 million in terms of target size, which I think says a lot also on the maturity development of the impact investing ecosystem in Europe. Our role remains to be a cornerstone investor. We are very vigilant on tailoring our commitment to the best need of the fund. In other words, crowd in and not crowd out private investors. Again, perhaps as a conclusion to illustrate our role and how our position on the impact ecosystem has evolved in the last 15 years, we started with a pilot fund of fund. The Social Impact Accelerator started as 50 million pilot, was extended then to a permanent fund of fund of 250 million euros. So we moved from really a pilot to supporting a niche of the venture capital ecosystem. We now see that impact has evolved from a niche to a mainstream part of the venture capital ecosystem and a very prominent part of venture capital strategies across Europe. And now in 2023, I would even say that impact investing is really at the heart of the venture capital ecosystem. So it has moved from really a tiny niche pilot pushed forward by pioneers, if not evangelists of the impact investing ecosystem. And now we see those pioneers raising perhaps third, fourth generation of fund. And we also see blue chip tech investors investing or raising impact strategies as well. So the asset class, provided one can speak about an asset class, has in our view evolved considerably, professionalized considerably, and actually is demonstrating that impact performance and financial performance are actually not mutually exclusive. And this is the core assumption on which our investment strategy lies. There has to be a positive correlation between impact performance, tangible, measurable, and financial performance.
Thank you, Cyril. And you touched on an interesting point, and maybe one worth mentioning, just I guess in terms of the growth of the size of the ticket sizes that the EIF has made, from 2013-14 to now. I think it's worth us all remembering that the money that and capital that we need to address the global challenges and challenges within Greece already exist. It's not that we need to, start printing it. It's, as you've seen as well, once the ecosystem is there, once the opportunities are investable, the capital will flow. And we'll hear more about, some of the funding opportunities available, but it's worth keeping in mind that the capital's ready to come in once the ecosystem and opportunities are built out.
Exactly.
So let's switch gears a bit and talk about some of the challenges. Oh, Dimitris is back. Welcome. Great. So before we jump into that, so with Schroders being the largest financial institution on the panel and perspective that we've had, from your vantage point, how would you, and you personally have a strong presence in Greece, how would you compare the kind of Greek impact investment market as it stands now versus that of Europe more broadly?
First of all, you can hear me all right? You can hear me
Yes.
again. Perfect. Okay. Well, let me, before I answer directly to your question, let me elaborate a little bit what we think is changing and how much of importance impact investment is getting. So at Schroders, we think that there is a new era which we are entering now. And as I was elucidating at the beginning, we are a global asset manager. We have been only doing asset management since our biggest history, however. And we think that we have entered asset management 3.0. So the first, let's say, wave of asset management was just, on returns. Then the second wave was return and risk. And now we have to consider a third layer, which is so return, risk, and of course impact. So in our understanding, the whole environment of impact investment is getting more and more important. It is outdated to just look on profits. We really have to care about beyond profits. And that's exactly what we are trying to achieve, not only within Europe, but also in countries which we want to be exposed to as an asset manager. And we see a lot of movements here in the investment space, which we not only try to engage with. So what I mean with this is that we try as a company, as an investment manager, really to be part of the journey of companies, of the impact journey of companies. We really want to try to reach the next targets of companies who have these kind of targets. And how we do this is actually, we really want to seek companies who have the intention, the clear intention, to solve social and environmental challenges, that they have the contribution, so that they contribute in solving impact problems through their products and services. And then at the third level, we really try to measure their impact. This is how we invest in impact. And we do this on a multi-facets. So it's not purely on, let's say, equities or bonds. We really try to engage here on multi-attitudes, let's say. And if we look, let's say, on the public versus the private asset space, and to give you a little bit of understanding, the market value of public fixed income and equities in general is around $230 trillion, whereas in the private asset space it's around 10 trillion. And we see this moving actually quite fast into the direction of private assets. And why I'm mentioning this is because impact is more directly accessible, I would say, through private assets. There are a lot of reasons why I tell you this. And one of the biggest reasons is that you have a longevity with companies you're investing in, especially in the private equity space. And you have longer periods of investments. You collaborate with management more closely, and you have an active ownership. This we see throughout the region of Europe and also in Greece. And what we see especially in Greece is that companies have been recalibrating their business models. So Greece was one of the countries in the past which have been hit quite strongly from a diversity of crises, as we have been hearing in the previous sessions as well. So companies in Greece, they had to recalibrate their business model all over and over again. And I think being part of this calibration and giving also or bringing new ideas through technology or new ideas in terms of impact investment, I think Greek companies in general have a very good resilience in terms of being one of the key impact drivers in Europe, if you ask me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dimitri. So in terms of challenges, Michael, that you've seen in the impact space more broadly or other regions, which in particular do you think are relatable to where Greece is now in terms of cultivating that impact ecosystem?
Well, one very much has to do with community. Greece has suffered a brain drain for decades, and the pandemic exacerbated that. But you all here are an example of what Kostas calls brain gain. Every single person I've talked to so far has said they'd like to spend more time in Greece if they're not already stationed here permanently on a full-time basis. So I think it's important to position Greece and its intellectual centers, economic centers like Athens as a place to be, a place to become. And you can feel it here, and even in my short time here, I can feel it here. I mean, to learn about the French restaurateur that sold his places and is now building his first natural wine bar and adding food in Athens. To hear that there's well over 100 well-funded fintech startups, that tech is a major focus here, and to diversify away from tourism and exporting of fuel and mainstream agriculture. That idea of what a place could become, which really lives ultimately in the hearts and minds of the professionals and the students that are working each day to transform that, is probably Greece's most incredible opportunity. And fostering that is something that this community can have a very specific role in facilitating. So that is incredible. And second, I would say the access to capital issues for the SME sector. Greece is a textbook example of what innovation within lending, innovation within financial services can accomplish. And I would be very, very curious and intrigued to plot the sort of SME access to capital issue over the next several years, as that is on the forefront of funders' minds, on the forefront of entrepreneurs within financial services, within fintech, and increasing that access to capital, which of course is how business goes from an idea to a medium enterprise with dozens of employees to sort of a mainstream activity, funded activity.
Thanks, Mike. And I think as well, in terms of people that want to help out, it's not just those that have left in recent years, but the significant Greek diaspora globally in Australia, the US, UK, who all, from my discussions, would love to contribute or reconnect if there were pathways to invest and support. And to now, there really hasn't been. So I think, beyond the brain regain, that could also be another area to tap into. Lena, in terms of one of the limitations you raised was around the lack of expertise when it came to financial instruments and social bonds. Would you like to share a little more about that?
Yes, I spoke about the public sector. First of all, I want to say the three speakers gave us very, very optimistic perspectives, and I'm very glad for that. We have to look at the barriers, we have to look at the opportunities together with the hurdles. And I think the one area we did not speak very much about, maybe because we don't like it, is the public sector. But I don't believe, at least in Greece, under the current circumstances, anything can progress without some sort of collaboration from the public sector. And there are many ways the public sector can be a facilitator, an enabler, or a hurdle. To start with, it's regulation. Any time of bond, any time of financial instrument needs to be accepted by the Bank of Greece in general. I mean, some exceptional cases, it's not the Bank of Greece. But funds in general need to be acceptable for the Bank of Greece. Like the green funds, we had already one green fund which the bank has accepted. But anything needs to be accepted. You know, some people say that in other countries, what is not forbidden is allowed. In Greece, what is not explicitly allowed is forbidden. And we need to keep this in mind. It is important to get the public sector into the game. So the first is to convince the public sector to regulate appropriately. And this is probably the less difficult part. I think politicians, in particular now that we are in the eve of multiple elections, they like to go into the media and speak about new ideas and impact funding, and in particular, you know, as the EIF claims, having impact funded together with returns on investment, that's great. So that's something that politicians can preach, can suggest, can talk to the media about. The problem is when we come to the implementation and the administration. The administration at the moment has a lot of funds, both the traditional European structural and investment funds and the RRF, the Resilience Fund, that needs to be spent partly on social progress. And this has been traditionally spent with grants. This is what the civil service knows, and the devil likes what he knows best. They don't see the reason to change things. And converting from grants into bonds, in the mindset of the managing authorities of the structural funds, this is huge. And you can't blame them. I mean, they have learned how to work with that for decades. We come out of a serious crisis. We come out of the pandemic. During the crisis and the pandemic, there was not much attention into changing things. So if the politicians now come with a great idea and they say, you know, impact investing, yes, we can mobilize private funds. We could even use structural and investment funds to match these funds, to leverage more private funding and make really a difference and make social interventions more effective and more efficient. Okay, green light from the political authorities, do it. And I think there we are going to need, and you are going to need a lot of work to convince people, to educate people, to make people implement this in the civil service. And there, I think, again, we come to the role of metrics. People are afraid of metrics. In particular, I mean, all the fund managers, of course, that's your bread and butter, and in the university, we teach a lot of mathematics. But when you come to the civil service, the maths is mostly adding numbers, and in certain cases, if you have to subtract them. But multiplication effects and things like that, and in particular, you know, going into the complicated metrics of if you save so and so much energy, how does it translate into really monetizing this? And if the bond should be rewarded with the monetization calculations, I think there will be a lot of resistance. And that brings me back to education, and not necessarily education directly by the universities, but by anyone who would be knowledgeable and willing to teach metrics to the civil service. I think these two areas are extremely important. Get the politicians, get the civil service.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lena. So Dimitri, we're running a little short on time, but in a couple of minutes, again, from an asset manager's perspective, what do you see are the constraints that are kind of holding back more capital from flowing into the Greek market as things stand?
Well, it's a good question. I think there are a lot of reasons, I would say. So one, you have, of course, to see the challenges what Greece has, right? So Greece is one of the countries which has a lot of coasts. So we have here pollution in the way coming from the sea, but also the natural pollution, if you would like, through waste and in general, you know, the pollution itself. What I think needs to be done aggressively and more aggressively, and if you see this compared to European standards, I think we have to more sensitize ourselves in terms of, especially in terms of the plastification. Plastic is one of the key issues, I would say, which hinders the next step, which is impact. And I think if, first of all, to get this sensitized feeling that we really have to care not only about our environment, but also the social issues, what is driving these trends, I think then Greece can have the biggest elevator, if you would like, in being a positive impact contributor. In general, I would say, you know, we have a lot of advantages, not only through the natural resources what we have, but also in terms of how we can combine and share our knowledge. I have always the impression that Greek entrepreneurs are not, you know, are always thinking the next steps, the next 2-3 steps ahead, which is very, very good. So I think if we can, you know, combine this impact feeling and also the kind of to care more about what are our footprints, then I think, you know, the ability what we see in Greece is far beyond what we can imagine, and this will then ideally lead to capital flows into Greece, which I think is a logical component here. So overall, in a nutshell, I think, you know, if we do our homework, if we, first of all, each and everyone can rethink his own impact on the environment, on the social issues, on what we see being really, and everyone has an opinion on that in Greece. And I think if we do our homework, then we can translate it also into company DNA. And overall, I'm really assured that we can play a leading role in terms of impact footprint.
Wonderful, thank you. Cyril, from your perspective, the EIF, of course, you know, Greece is one of the regions that you focus on, and there is capital available. Yet you've raised the point that you're not really seeing any applications come through from Greece, from funds. Would you like to kind of touch on maybe some of the challenges around that or constraints?
Definitely, and I would want to stress also loud and clear that the more proposal we receive from Greece, the better better off we are, really. So if in some ways also some people in the audience, on the panels, etc., would want to reach out directly and understand, have some kind of tailor-made understanding of what it takes to get funded from EIF, please reach out. Yeah, that's definitely, hopefully, one of the outcome of this of the event you're putting together. And on that note, with your question, I'd like to start off with commonly referred term, which is ecosystem, sometime not appreciated to its full magnitude, but I think this is really where it starts, and especially in the equity space, especially in the venture space, where for more impact funds, Greek impact funds to see the light, I believe a number of prerequisites are needed. And obviously, some are already there. The conference you're organizing is one symptom of that, and I think it's everything but trivial to gather the impact investing community at domestic scale to raise awareness and also facilitate synergies between non-impact players and perhaps impact pioneers. That's very important. So the ecosystem logic is very important. I'd like to also mention that, you know, to draw a parallel with the Silicon Valley, which is worse what is worse, but I think interesting to know that everybody reckons the Silicon Valley is some type of cluster area where innovation is really facilitated and innovation emerge, and this innovation then becomes global and touches each and every country, including individuals. Silicon Valley was started really with massive public funding. So in order to get to an ecosystem in Greece that could flourish and where we receive tens of impact fund proposals to screen every year, it's important to also have in mind that you need to have incubators, accelerators, you need to have universities, you need to also put the emphasis on having structures that can help mentor, seed the first investments in impact startups. So the ecosystem logic is very, very important, actually. The more support you provide to brilliant proof of concept seed ideas, the more you will find companies actually being able to raise from funds. So when you have successful companies active on an ecosystem, no doubt that more and more funds, more and more sources of funding will be here to actually support and push this growth and invest in this company. So ecosystem is very important. I would say also that it's important that, including when you are only an idea of a fund and perhaps you have one partner that is ready to push the idea of an impact fund, I think we are the right player also to be contacted, because our role is not exclusively to invest in funds, it is also to provide structuring input. So hopefully, because we have the experience we have, we can also share this experience with fund managers who are going to be tomorrow successful impact fund managers in Greece. So I cannot stress that enough. Our role is the one of an investor, of an LP in funds. It is also to spread and share market best practice. So my team and I are open to even look at and provide feedback on, let's say, proposals that are not yet investable or not yet, let's say, in the actively or officially fundraising. But our role is definitely to also provide input on these smart ideas put forward by smart, committed, driven teams. And I'd be more than happy to receive as many proposals as possible and start get the ball rolling on that basis.
Thank you, Cyril. So as we wrap up, I think a cause for optimism in the impact investment ecosystem here is the ability to take advantage of the leapfrog effect that impact investment as a whole has, over the past 10 to 20 years, has moved frustratingly slow for a lot of people on the inside, kind of banging the drum. But the good news is, here we don't need to go through that exact same process. We can take the best learnings, best practices from markets around the world and just go straight to what has worked rather than making all the same, mistakes or trying everything out. So it would be great to have a quick round of maybe one recommendation or key takeaway that you would like to impart.
Well, I would say we will meet again in a year. So between now and then, just decide to do something related to the Greek impact investment ecosystem. Could be make an impact investment, reward a business that ranks high in terms of impact, perhaps in the sustainable tourism, for instance. Make a local hire that moves towards impact, and let's meet in the year and see what's happened.
Wonderful. Lena?
Meeting here is a good idea, but what I think is important is also when you try to sensitize and educate the public, the civil service, the politicians, it is to be very honest. Impact investment is great. It's moving into the right direction, but it's not a silver bullet. And if anyone tries to sell it as a silver bullet, the audience will become suspicious and resistant to change. So it's great, but it needs time, systematic work, and honesty to make it happen in Greece.
Dimitri, a key takeaway or recommendation?
As I was saying at the beginning, we see a regime shift here through different factors. And I think, impact investment is definitely something which will change the whole investment landscape, if you want. And I would say also that those investors and also these entrepreneurs who will not be part of this journey, they will be missing definitely something, at least. They will definitely miss opportunities, but most importantly, they will be stacked in what we call stranded assets. And we see this coming, and we have clear targets within Europe. And I think, the next steps here, what we have to take is in terms of impact investment to really understand what we want from our investments, what we want to reach if we invest in companies, and how we really all can contribute through even small amounts of investments, how we all can contribute in this kind of shift and in the change what we will definitely have to face, all of us.
Wonderful. And finally, Cyril, a key recommendation from your side.
Yes. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I totally relate to what was said earlier. I think the biggest threat for impact investing is to assume impact investing can do it all. And I'd like to draw a parallel with microfinance. Microfinance has been a huge breakthrough for financial social inclusion. But the day it was presented as a magic stick to eradicate poverty on Earth, I think microfinance started to fall short of undue expectation on its shoulders. Impact investing is a very powerful tool to accelerate innovation and accelerate social innovation, climate-related innovation. But to flourish, it also needs well-functioning NGOs, well-functioning welfare state, well-functioning companies as a whole. So that would be, to me, also the biggest or one of the important points I'd like to stress. Next to the following ones, please get in touch, even if you have a very remote idea of setting up an impact fund in Greece. I'd be more than happy to share our knowledge and hopefully get to the materialization of the first Greek impact fund.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the panel. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.